You've just stepped into the Buzzy's Country Store podcast, part-time porch talk, part-time therapy session, and all heart. I'm Chief Larry, and along with your host, J Scott Ridgell, we're serving up real stories with a Buzzy's twist.
Hello, welcome to the Buzzy podcast. This week is part 2 with my good neighbor, Muffin. How do you say that? McCoy's no problem, but Padukiewicz.
Padukiewicz. If you're me, and my husband says Padukiewicz. And in Poland, it's Padukiewicz.
Oh, the C's of E?
Padukiewicz.
Huh. How many times people get that right as far as that name? I bet that's butchered from here to...
Well, and it really doesn't matter because everybody says it differently, so it's okay.
I thought we'd pick up kind of where we left off. You had met John and got married, and you had you did mention. I thought that was funny about 3 Southern babies in
yes.
3 different Southern states.
Yes, and the deep South. And
now, but I did.
hot.
I went back and listened to this a couple times, but it kind of confused me about John's career. Mm-hmm. He went in the Army.
Yes, he did. He graduated from Loyola, ROTC. And he was a commissioned officer, so he was a second lieutenant, and he was a year ahead of me. So he graduated in 1974, and he went down to Fort Bliss, Texas, and he trained there for a year, air defense artillery, and they had the Chaparral and the Vulcan. One was you would shoot the missile up, and the other was air missile. And then he was stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington, where his father had retired. So he was able to live at home, and he was at Fort Lewis. And then when I graduated in 1978 is when he went out there. And I graduated in 1979, a year later. We got married a week later and went out to Fort Lewis, Washington.
You say his father had retired. Was his father in the Army?
Yes, and that is another story if you want to hear it.
Sure.
Okay, John's father was born in 1927 in Krakow, Poland.
Oh.
That was a very tumultuous time in that part of Europe.
Yep.
When he was about, I want to say maybe 11, 12 years old, the Nazi occupation came through, and they took the family farm. His mother was a widow. She had several children. They did not have a lot of money. It was a very small farm. And the Nazis said, we need one of your sons, and he's going to go in the army. And, like supporting the Nazi army as in like digging ditches, et cetera. Your daughter, she was probably in her late teens, has to go and work in the hospitals. Then Kaz was John's dad, and he had a little brother named Thaddeus. And he said, one of those 2 boys needs to go to the work camps. And so Kaz went to the work camps, which were pretty much slave labor. He talked about how he slept on a wooden slab, had hardly any food to eat. He'd have to steal it from the animals. He fed the pigs, etc. And he said they weren't really cruel to him because he was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed. He looked Aryan. He looked like a German child. And so he said they weren't kind, but they did not abuse him terribly. He later escaped, and that was during the war. And he, because it got worse and worse as time went on, he escaped, and it was toward pretty close to the end of World War II. And the remnants of the Polish army he met up with, and he lied about his age. He probably was 15, 16. And they let him enter. And then the Polish army, I don't exactly know all the details, but it was subsumed by the English army. So he went into the English army, and just about when the war was ending, he was let go, and he joined the French Foreign Legion. So
Whoa.
This is a man who has a storied
he
past.
got around. Wow.
He did. He was a paratrooper in the French Foreign Legion, and they would jump out head first out of the airplane. So he has a beautiful plaque. He's long gone now, but he had a plaque, and on it there were pictures of them jumping out of the airplanes head first. So when he was in the French Foreign Legion, John's father, Kaz Padukiewicz, he went to South Africa and Algiers, and he fought there. And then he was in Indochina, which was Vietnam later, with the French. And he should not be alive, or he should not have survived, because the policy in the French Foreign Legion was, if you're wounded and you're wounded severely, you're left behind. So he made a pact with his buddies, and they said, if somebody's hurt, we're going to get you out. So he was shot in the knee, and his knee was shattered, and he's laying there by the side of the road. His buddy picked him up and took him to the medical tent, and then ran back, and everybody was killed except for the Kaz, who was in the medical tent by other soldiers. I don't know if everybody died, but that's the story. So he survived, and he shouldn't have. And then he, oh my goodness, such a story. After the war, he went back to France because he could speak French after that, and Poland was devastated. He went and worked in a factory, and he was very small because he had lived through starvation, and then he had never grown to his full height. He was maybe 5'5", 5'6", and he had the Polish genes. He should have been very large and tall like my husband. And he was in the factory. It was a steel factory, I believe, and he just couldn't do it. And he heard on the radio, and it was an ad that said, anybody who's in the service and comes in and works with the American Army, after a certain amount of time, you can become a naturalized citizen. And anybody in the world at that time respected the American Army because it had saved Europe. Army, Navy.
Wow, yeah, good.
And so he entered, and he ended up in Korea. So it was post-Korean War.
And he entered he was
The U.S.
Army.
The U.S. Army, not a citizen, was naturalized. It was all under Eisenhower. There was this big push. And he adored Eisenhower because of this, that there was this policy where you could become a citizen. And there were blanket naturalization ceremonies, all different places. And at one time, I think in one day, I'm not sure what day it was, it might have been Veterans Day, 50,000 people were naturalized all over in different places. And Kaz's father was one of them. So that was really cool. But he went to Korea post-Korean War, and he was there, and he was a master sergeant. And he drove the Jeeps around, and he drove Bob Hope around and would stay and watch his shows, and he loved that. And
I'll bet.
But he met John's mother, and fell in love, and they got married. And John was born, in a little, like a little hut, I guess, and was delivered by a midwife, and
In Korea?
in Korea, Seoul, Korea. And his brother was also born about 2 years later. He's my age, Tommy. And so we always call them the Seoul brothers because they were both born in Seoul, Korea. And then they came back to the United States and later had John's two sisters. So there were 4 of them. But when John's father died, we said, he always wanted to be buried at up in Virginia at Arlington. And we always thought, maybe he couldn't be. I'm not sure. So we checked. And not only could he be buried there, but they had representatives of the French Foreign Legion came. The English Army sent a representative, and so did the Polish Army. So it was quite a
4
lovely...
armies.
Yes, and the American Army, of course.
5.
But and it was just a very small ceremony, but it was beautiful.
What year?
That would have been, I'm not sure. So he died at like 75, so it was in probably 2000. We were here already. I'd have to look it up, sorry. But
But you attended all
yes,
this.
he came down. Father O'Connell was our Maury O'Connell, beloved priest.
Yes.
He had a funeral on the West Coast, and then they flew his body here, and we had a ceremony at St. Michael's, and then he went up to Arlington and had the funeral there, or the service there. So he's there.
Wow, what a story. How about the mom? The wife?
Yes. They did divorce later. I think many women married soldiers thinking that it was going to be an easy life, and then, he was a master sergeant. Well, it was very difficult with 4 kids. And so she actually left, and Kaz raised the 4 children.
Wow.
So that's how he ended up out on the West Coast. But they visited. So.
But I mean, what happened to her? Did
She died later.
Later.
She lived in San Francisco. She was a Buddhist growing up. She became Christian later. And she had a pretty happy life later. Had a lot of friends and did things, but they never reconciled. They talked to each other.
Did John ever hear from the sisters? Or
his two sisters are on the West Coast. Yeah, we were
Okay.
just out west on the West Coast. That's another story. When we were there, when we lived there, it was 1979, and my sister Ann was going to have Ian, and she had just had Ian, her oldest child, and so I left early. So it's like April I left of 1980. And John was following in his car a few weeks later. And just as he was reaching the border of Idaho and Washington State, a certain mountain blew up. And it was Mount St. Helens exploded. So he just missed it by like 2 hours. But his brother Tommy, his soul brother, was a Washington State patrolman, and he was one of the ones that did crowd control and helped people evacuate. So it was really interesting. We just made it out. I always thought I should have named Kristen Helena or something like that, but didn't, because she was the baby that I was pregnant with as I drove.
As you were getting the heck out of there.
But didn't know that happened. So it was, but we went back to Washington State. And with Tommy, we went out to Mount St. Helens and saw it. And you can still see some devastation, but all the trees have grown back. It's beautiful, but the mountain looks nothing like it did the last time I saw it, which was before it blew. So.
Well, but now orient me now of Fort Washington or Fort Lewis.
Fort Lewis is on the coast.
Is on the coast.
But
Okay.
Mount St. Helens is closer to the Idaho coast.
Okay.
It's more central.
Okay.
So.
So you went out to Fort Lewis with John there,
Yes.
right? That's why I got you diverted on
Oh, yeah.
Dad.
We
But
were
that
there
was
for-
fascinating story. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's the weave. But yeah, I was saying that, you go off on these tangents, but we always come back. But yes, so John, as I told you last time in the other podcast, he was accepted to fly. And so he left Washington State, and when we both did, and went to Fort Rucker. And that's where I had my first child. And he was in flight school, and it was an interesting thing that flight school was very, very difficult. They had a little trainer, and it was hard to keep it steady and straight. And a lot of the young, soon-to-be pilots just could not stay straight, make it work. And they would come home so depressed that first week. And then John came home and he said, the trainers said, if you give a monkey enough bananas, even a monkey can learn to fly. And he did, and all the other guys did too. So really, it kind of broke the ice. And then John said, they said when these trainers were back in school, they said they used to have, their trainers had baseball bat, and they would hit them on the back of the helmet when they messed up.
Wow.
And so with enough smacks on the head,
You learned.
they could learn. But it was bananas by the time he came along. So we were there. I had one interesting experience is I went in to deliver Kristen, and the military had this policy, I'm sure you may have heard of it. If they had wanted you to have a wife, they would have issued you one. Yes,
yeah.
exactly. So flight school was the priority. And so I went into labor, and luckily John was able to join me. And so he was there for Kristen's birth, but he had to go right back. And I had to have another wife pick me up from the hospital, and she had just had a baby like 3 weeks earlier. And so came home alone. He was gone a lot. But in the hospital, it was in Ozark, Alabama. And I, at 22, was the oldest mother giving birth. Next to me in the bed, in an adjoining, and we had a double room, was a 16-year-old giving birth, chain smoking. So it was a different world then.
Now, was this a civilian or was this
A civilian
It
hospital.
was a civilian. Gotcha.
A very small town. Dale County, Alabama, Ozark Hospital. It was Very country.
Sounds like it. Sounds like it.
Yeah. Kristen says, Kristen, you know how sometimes you want to come off kind of cool? And she goes, people say, where were you born? Ozark Hospital in Alabama. And, it wasn't like saying New York City, New York, or one of those cool places. So.
Well, I was born in Enid, Oklahoma.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. My dad was in the Air Force. Yeah. And it's funny. I never thought of myself as an Okie from Oklahoma.
And you are.
Yeah.
But anyway, we were at Fort Rucker. He did get his wings. And Kaz, his very, very, very proud father, came out from the West Coast and pinned on his wings.
Oh, good.
So that was one of his really high points of his fatherhood. And then,
I'll
yeah.
bet.
But we ended up then at Fort Bragg and with the 82nd Airborne, because John also was a parachutist and got to wear the cool red beret. And he flew there. And then he had to go back to Fort Rucker again for more training. So we returned. And then that's next one was Savannah, which I mentioned to you. He saw the Coast Guard guys who are living the good life. And he was told that his next step was to fly a desk. And so he switched over to the Coast Guard.
Now, what was he flying?
Well, he flew the Cobra. So that was the attacked helicopter. You probably, did you ever see it in Vietnam? Because
No.
the Hueys were the ones just before that, the Iroquois. But he flew the Cobra, which was that cool looking one with the guns on the side. And he flew that.
So, what was the desk job?
The desk job would be...
a promotion to do?
Well, what happened is you went to captain's school, and they would tell you are now going to be in charge, and that you would not be somebody who is a
Yeah.
pilot any longer, because the warrant officers got to be the pilots in the
Okay.
Army as
So
time went on.
How many years are we talking now? 6?
He was 7 years, and then he
7?
switched over.
Switched now. When you say switched over, did he have to leave the Army? I'm putting my papers in and...
Yeah, I think it was, you actually lost a little bit of rank, but it was a straight transfer, but he lost like a year of rank doing
So
that.
were you
but earned it
there
back.
with him?
Yes, I was.
At Bragg?
Yes. Fort Bragg, we were there about 4 years. We lived in an apartment. We finally got quarters. We lived on base. We bought a house. And so that was like 3 moves during that time. But it was a wonderful place to be. The esprit de corps was great because 82nd Airborne, I wouldn't say that it was the most beautiful part of North Carolina, but it was a very, very nice place to live as far as everybody was working together. Everybody had the same goals. The wives really stuck together. The men were very busy, so we watched out for each other.
Good.
So it's a good place.
Well, that was something I was going to ask you about is the whole military wife thing.
Oh, interesting.
I just, I really have never really talked to any female about it at length, but you always see them on these movies and stories as kind of sad, life.
Well, I think I grew up in that kind of changing generation where we were independent women and we saw ourselves as independent women, and then suddenly you're a dependent, military dependent. When I went out to Washington State, made wonderful friends, and we would hang together. It was at a time where some of the wives were still the wives who had served, their husbands had served during World War II and during the Korean War. I remember that there were really only 2 jobs, well, there were 3 jobs that were acceptable for an officer's wife. One was to be a teacher, one was to be a nurse, and the other was to be a wife and support your husband. Other people did have other jobs, but I do remember that maybe the upper echelon might kind of frown upon them, but that was ending by the time I came. I remember going to the New Year's party at the Officers Club. This is back when officers clubs were officers clubs, and now it's everybody. They have the club. And it was New Year's, and I'm there just out of college. I'd been married to John 4 or 5 months, and I couldn't believe it because the wives, the older wives, were dancing on tables by the end of the night. And I was like, I just didn't think this was what they did. Oh my goodness. So that was eye-opening. Chris Christopherson's sister was one of the colonel's wives there. And I was like, wow, Chris Christopherson's sister. A lot of interesting things. I could tell you stories, but the times were changing. And one of the things is when your husband's fitness report came out, it was always mentioned on there whether the wife was supportive and that they did their volunteer hours. You were expected to do a certain number of volunteer hours for Army Community Service or at the thrift store or in support of the children's activities. And one of the jobs I had was writing for the newspaper, the base newspaper, because I was always in communications and writing. And I got to interview Mrs. Cavazos, which I do believe one of the bases down in Texas is Fort Cavazos. And he was one of the last ones out during the Iran hostage crisis. Because you're thinking, this is 1979, 1980, and they were still hostages. But he got out because they hid him and sneaked him out. But his wife I interviewed, and she was telling about how harrowing it was to not know whether her husband was safe, whether he got out.
Yeah.
So that was a fun interview.
I'll bet.
And dumb me, not knowing anything and being young, I said, well, I live over here in these quarters. You probably have never been here. And then I went, oh, this woman has lived the Army life. She was a young wife with no money. John's father, when he met me, he wasn't as warm as one would think. I went out to visit John at Christmas, and that's when he and I got engaged. And met his father for the first time, and his father thought that I was marrying John for his money. When we got married, John was making $700 a month. He was paying for his car payment, which was $200 something, and I was paying off my college loan. So we did not have much extra money.
Right.
I made terrible meals. I remember buying things at the commissary, and I wasn't the best cook, and trying to do it on the cheap.
Sure.
Yeah. So, no, we did not have a lot of money.
Well, you're in the Army, right?
Yes, exactly.
And what was he, first lieutenant or what?
Second lieutenant, and then on
Right.
up. Yeah.
Right.
So
move on from Fort Bragg. Where did you guys go from there?
well, then we
He
were in
goes in the Coast Guard.
Yes. So he was at Hunter Army Airfield. Then he switched over to the Coast Guard, and we went down to Miami. And we lived down in Miami for 5 years. Our house actually was in Davie, Florida, just north. Fort Lauderdale was towards the coast, even with Davie, Florida. And that's when nobody cared about what the wives were doing, as long as they behaved. But in the Coast Guard, it didn't matter. We were not on our husband's fitness reports. Times had really changed. And the Coast Guard was more like family life because he was home. He would have duty, but he was not gone for months at a time. So he might be overnight on base. One of the biggest faux pas I ever did was in the Army. He was a captain, and the ranks in the Army are very different than those in the Navy and the Coast Guard. So I called the base after we'd been there for about 3 weeks, and some smart aleck answered the phone, and I said, could I speak to Captain Padukiewicz? And they're like, Captain Padukiewicz, because the captain was like the head of the entire base. And he got on the loudspeaker and said, I have a woman here that wants to talk to some fake Captain Padukiewicz. And John said, don't ever do that again.
I'll bet.
Please don't ever do that again. But it was cool because they were the pilots and they really enjoyed life. When we were in Miami, the kids are always, I'm a school teacher now, and they're always saying, the Bermuda Triangle, terrible things happen there. And I said, Mr. P, that's what they call Mr. Padukiewicz, Mr. P, every time he flew his helicopter, he was in the Bermuda Triangle because the Bermuda Triangle encompasses Miami and out the coast all the way over to Bermuda. And I said, there were some odd things that might have happened, but nothing that was related to the Bermuda Triangle and aliens or going into extra dimensions. But there were some things that did happen. Mr. P said that whenever they had engine trouble, they tried to have it near an island that was quite beautiful. So that they would have to go down and have it checked by the, the mechanics. And that was another thing. He said that you always wanted to take care of your mechanics because your life depended on that. And so I would talk to somebody and I'd say, oh, what do you do? And they say, I'm a mechanic. I'm just a mechanic. And I went, oh my gosh, I pray for you guys all the time because you are what keeps my husband safe.
Right.
Yes. So
Yeah, I don't think of the Coast Guard as much as aviation as I do. So there is obviously a aviation.
Oh,
branch
yes.
of-
Well, yeah. Think about it. A lot of the calls when he was in the Coast Guard in the Miami area were the cruise ships. Because John said somebody hurts themselves on a cruise ship or has heart attacks, which happens a lot with the elderly folks, or strokes. They want to get them off that ship so fast. So they immediately call the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard lands and gets them. A lot of times, though, they will be lowering the basket, and you have to be in really bad shape if you don't want to get on it because otherwise they just lift you and put it. And people would say, I would rather die. I'm not going to get into that and be lifted up. Another thing people did is they say, they would have a boat off the coast of Fort Lauderdale, and they'd call in and say, my little one fell overboard, and, and the helicopter would start flying out, and they found that the little one was a poodle, and they were not supposed to be being sent out for thousands and thousands of dollars.
Right.
They also did migration. If there was a lot of Haitian migration at the time, and they would try, there was a lot of saving they did because people would be out there at sea.
100 to a boat.
And they would not have water or food, and they'd have to rescue. So that's what the Coast Guard's mission was. When we first got there too, we had on our so proud, now he's in the Coast Guard. We would have a bumper sticker, and they said, take those bumper stickers off because drug interdiction was also, you had the intercoastal waterways in the Miami area, and the cigarette boats, I don't know if we still have them, but they were the speed boats that would be moving drugs up and down. And so there was a lot of organized crime, and they didn't think highly of the Coast Guard and drug interdiction. So we learned not to have identifying things on our cars and vehicles.
Where to from Miami?
Oh, I had to think. Then we moved out to North Bend, Coos Bay, Oregon, which was probably our most wonderful posting. Yeah. We lived along the coast, and we were able to find a house, and it was on Kentuck Inlet in Coos Bay, North Bend, Oregon. And so there were you had the ocean and the sand dunes. It was just beautiful. And then small hills, and then the Kentuck Inlet, which was an inlet that came in like a small Potomac River idea, up into like a rock quarry far back. And it was fields filled with sheep. And it was just gorgeous. We got the coyotes here later, but you would hear the coyotes. I had never heard the coyotes calling in the night. One day I had 2 children in school, and then Will was a baby there. They said to me, somebody called and said, there's a bear coming over, get your kids in. And there was a black bear coming over the hill. I never saw it, but we saw the footprints later. We had a dog for a little while, and we would go up and pick the blackberries all over the hills, and we would see the scat from the bear and the scratches on the trees. And the sheep farmer, who was our best friend in the entire world, he was a wonderful man, he said, take the dog with you because the bear will go for the dog or the dog will defend you. And he did not like us out there getting the blackberries in the hills. And we were ignoring them. We just didn't know.
2 kids at the time?
Well, we had Kristen and Johnny. Kristen was about 9 when we got there. Johnny was about 5, and Will was a 6-week-old baby.
Oh, so you had 3.
3.
That's right, your southern babies.
Yeah, my southern babies. And
how long were you there in Oregon?
5 years.
5.
Loved it. If Mom had not been in her old age and then Matthew moving, we were tempted to stay. But it was a very good move because all of our children got great educations on the East Coast. And
So that was
went on.
about the 20-year mark?
Yes. Well, he became the chief of advertising for the Coast Guard. We were looking for a Coast Guard station close to here. So it was in Northern Virginia, Ballston, Virginia. Yeah. So he was up in Ballston, went up there on the weekends, stayed in a room in a house that somebody was, renting. It was miserable. But he would come home, and I was here while the house was being built. So Mom had the big house. We stayed with her, and the kids went into St. Michael's and reunited with all the folks here.
I bet that was nice
It
to
was.
come back.
Yeah, because I was telling the kids before we came, I said, Will, you'll be in school with my best friend in the whole world, Lila's kids. And I thought that they would be in, not with Amy, but with Jeannie. And so he was all ready to go to school with Jeannie, and it was Amy, whose class he was in, and Jeannie was a year behind. But that was a great class. JJ Rayleigh was in it, other kids that you would know. And it was a dynamic class, very much like your class.
Home.
You can go home.
You were probably no. Was John okay with all this?
Well, oh yes, John is just a good guy all around.
Good.
Yeah,
I could see where you would be ecstatic.
well, I was very happy to come home, but I just didn't know how I was going to fit back in. Didn't know Will was now in school, and like Mom, I was like, should I work? And I said, well, I won't work full time for a year. So I got a job with the county under a grant, building a database of the services that were available. Then Mom, who was very active at Historic St. Mary's City, she was in the Friends or the Foundation, and I go to a party. She said, oh, come to this party with me. And so, came in, and everybody was so nice because they remembered me as a little girl or a medium girl and Beth's daughter. And the next thing I know is they're trying to get me to work up there. And I'm like, no, I'm not ready to work full time. And I've got this little job on the side. And Stu Egley, if you remember,
Sure.
Peter Egley's wife, the famous artist, beautiful, beautiful, lovely, lovely lady. And Jeannie Chandler, not the one from down here, but another Jeannie Chandler who lived up in St. Inigo's, really started working on me, that they wanted me to come and work up there. There was kind of a difficult situation. I think they thought that I would be the magic solution because I was Beth and Fred's daughter, so nobody could be mean to me. I knew everybody or they knew of me, and they always thought, oh, what a sweet girl, and blah, blah, blah. And they had always heard about me from Mom, my daughter who lives on the West Coast. So I come to this party, and they start, twisting my arm, and then Stu Egley had me on the phone for like 3 hours saying, we really need you. Come to find out later, they had 2 organizations that were trying to meld together, and they were going to have the board have some leave and some stay. And they thought, if we make her the administrative assistant or the coordinator here, nobody will be mean to her. So that's what they hired me for. I was kind of the fall guy, but I didn't even know it for a couple months. They were all so nice to me.
But you could handle that.
Yeah, but nobody told me that's what I was doing.
Right. Well, it might have been for the better because you.
Oh, I walked in just like Sweet Pea. If you ever see the old commercials where you have Popeye and Olive Oyl and Brutus, and Sweet Pea goes out the window and everybody's going, oh my, and la 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 la, oblivious, and he's crawling across the little clothesline that goes, and trucks are whizzing by. And so here I am, just so innocent and, not knowing who I was and where I was and how I got into this position. And the Madrigal dinners, which was a big thing, were beginning like 2 months later. And so I had a lot of help. I met so many wonderful people there.
How long did you do that?
20 years.
Yeah.
Yes, so 20 years. It was just going to be for a little while. Kind of like going to St. Michael's. I was just going to teach maybe enough to pay for what I paid for tuition to go back to school and get my master's. I said, I just need to make X amount and then I'll retire. And it's going to be 9 years now.
I was going to say you've been at St. Michael's. So
St.
you did
Michael's?
20 at St. Mary's City and then 9 here at St. Michael's.
Yeah, what happened at St. Mary's City is I just got more and more to do. I was working with the Friends organization, the membership organization, the fundraising, and the proudest things I am of is working, not as an archaeologist, but for and with them to raise money for projects. The Brick Chapel of 1667 worked on all the fundraising. I wasn't in charge, but worked on the fundraising with that, and to build the Van Swearingen Inn. And your relatives can go back on that one to the Kirk House and the Smiths and all that. You've got a lot of history there that you might not be aware of.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and just so many events like that. Reconstructing buildings that we only had the artifacts and maybe the foundations for, and other buildings that there wasn't as much evidence. Before my wedding, mine and John's wedding, Mom said, "How many people are on John's side?" And I said, "He really doesn't have many people, maybe like 5." And she said, "Oh." And there were 350 people at my wedding. You were the photographer. I don't know if you remember.
I do.
So I was meeting people for the first time in the receiving line. It was a very hot day. But she said, "There are 2 young men I can't wait for you to meet." And I said, "Really?" And she said, "They're just these young boys, and they're doctors in archaeology." And she said, "They're doing such good work there. They're doing fine work." And it was Dr. Henry Miller. And Tim Reardon, Dr. Tim Reardon. And there were other people like Silas Hurry and Don Winter and Ruth Mitchell. All of them, it was a mission. They were discovering the old city. They were finding out the secrets of archaeology, and they were rebuilding the city.
They've done a great job.
They have done a wonderful job. High point of my life lately was to be invited back for the finishing of seeing the chapel finished. And then about a month ago to see the bodies being reinterred.
I know.
Beautiful ceremony.
Yes, everybody's raving about that.
And it was just beautiful. And it wasn't for me. I always feel like I'm like this ghost of a stand-in for my mom and dad. And it's a great honor. It really is. And
Kathy Wright said almost the same thing.
yeah, I saw her there.
Well, she mentioned almost the same words, that she felt her aunts and uncles and her family. So
Exactly.
that was kind of a cool affair.
Oh, it was. So I got to work there with these people. But what happened is it just got more and more and more. And I did over 1,000 weddings as fundraisers. And that money would go into rebuilding things. So many events and
Your
festivals.
predecessor, Maggie Marley? Right?
Yes. I feel like I talked about the generations returning, and even though I was young then, I was in my 30s still, I got to, at my wedding was General Hugaboom, and he gave me a Waterford glass, beautiful thing. I still have it. I said, General Hugaboom gave me that. He had been a very, very well-known general in the the Marines. And I have an interesting thing to tell you about that. But anyway, and I knew his first wife, and then I knew his second wife quite well, Maureen Holbert Hugaboom, who had been an actress on stage, lovely woman, and Maggie and Mike Marley. Mike Marley, before World War II, had gotten a motorcycle. He was like 18 years old, so probably in the late 30s. He said he went on Route 66 across country on this motorcycle out west, and his mother was just dying. But he met Maggie, they got married, and they were going to make it rich. They decided to have cranberry bogs out west. I think possibly Oregon or Washington State. It did not do well. But nobody could live up to Maggie. I remember her coming to events, and she's looking and seeing, and she was very kind. She said, "Oh, you're doing such wonderful work. A little different than I would have done it, but beautiful work." Polly Barber was there. Polly Barber, who I'd known as a child, and just all of those people that were so interesting. I'm trying to think of some others. As time went on the commission was Ben Bradley, Shep McKinney, federal judges, people I probably would never have met. I got to go to dinner a couple times at Ben Bradley's house, not at the main table, but
at the kids' table.
at the kids' table, or maybe no table at all, appetizer time, and then ushered out. But Ben Bradley was one of the most personable, regular guys, and he was truly interested in you. He got some awards, and he said, those two girls in the office, those two girls in the office. And it was Portia Purvis, who was the head administrative assistant. She's still there. And then me from the foundation. And we got to go to these events because he just remembered working with us and liked us so very much. John got to be his chauffeur at some events because it got to be, as Ben got older, he needed a driver, and, there weren't all of these Ubers and all. And so John Padukiewicz driving for hours with Ben Bradley. Who knew?
So compared to St. Michael's, and that you did 20 years there, that the St. Michael's was kind of sort of third grade kids.
Third and fourth grade. But
And you've done that 9 years already?
I'm in my 9th year right now. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is this it? Is this the end of your...
Who knew I'd be there this long? Well, this is how I got to St. Michael's. So I decided I'm tired. I'm tired of fundraising. I'm tired of events.
That's a lot of work.
Yes. So about 18 years in, I said, what can I do? And I looked at the college and I said, I wonder if they have any master's degrees there. The only master's degree they had was a master's in the art of teaching. So I called over there and I said to the head of the program, I said, I'm 57 years old and I work over here. And she said, oh, yeah, Muffin, I know you, because everybody knows everybody. And she said, yes, we'd love to have you. And I'm like, and she said, but you're going to have to go back to school. It has been 40-something years since you were in undergraduate. So I go over. I had to take basic math. Because I was in a yoga class on the side, she said, you don't have to do PE. I had to take biology. It was a baby biology, marine biology. I had a bunch of classes, and it was very daunting to be me, to be more mature, and to walk into an undergraduate class of like the cool kids at St. Mary's College of Maryland. Well, so I got there kind of early the first day, and I'm sitting in the back, and these kids are coming in, and, they wear their pajamas, a lot of them. And they're coming in, they're looking at me, and they go, are you the teacher? Are you the supervisor? What are you? And I said, no, I'm going back to school. I want to get into the MAT program, and I have to take these courses. They were so nice. I would say to them, how do you, snip something by using, and they go, oh, it's Control X or whatever. Yeah. And they would tell me all these things. And then it was like they're asking me advice. And so I became like grandma.
Yeah.
And
what, you can do that. You can pull that off.
I was real good at that. I hadn't had any grandchildren yet. But they would, they treated me very kindly.
Good.
Then I got into the MAT, which is the Master's in the Arts of Teaching, and it was so hard. I remember almost being in tears because we had to manipulate all of these things, make videos of our classes, and it was all new. And it wasn't impossible, but it seemed like it was. And one thing was I go into one of my classes and I look, and there's all these kids in there, and this girl stands up, and it was my niece who was there, Casey's best friend, Jenny. And she goes, Aunt Muffin! And she comes over and gives me a hug, and she goes, come sit down with me. And Jenny was absolutely beautiful, and everybody loved her. And everybody's, she's your Aunt Muffin. And she says, well, she practically is. And, they're down at the house all the time, weekends and summers, etc. And it was just so nice to be very mature.
How long was that?
The program, counting the undergraduates, was almost 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and I did it full time.
Were you still working at this?
I was working full time there because I would be doing events. I worked all weekend. But hey, I'm my mother's child.
That McCoy energy.
Yeah. Some of us are very, very, very what you would call energetic, and we always wanted to do well. I actually was chosen to give the graduation speech. Wow. So by the kids, they voted.
So what is that? Is that an MBA, MSA? What is it?
It's a master's in the art of teaching. So it's a master's.
Master's.
So I finished my program, very proud of myself, and I left historic St. Mary City. I said, I'll stay. And Mary Bohannon, who since has passed away, lovely woman, she replaced me.
Right.
So she was there. And same thing. She ran it. Did so much work.
Oh, yeah.
But I had several people offered me different jobs because I was really into the environment and biology, and and I get this text from my best friend from childhood, Lila, your sister, and she says, "Would you like to come in and interview?" And I said, "Well, I think I'm okay. I've got a few, percolating." She says, "No, come in." And I said, "Well, when do you want me?" And she says, "This day and this time," and it was very particular time. So I see a lot of cars in the parking lot of St. Michael's, and it was kindergarten graduation. So I walk in, and there's these darling children prancing and dancing and singing on stage, and I knew so many of their parents. I knew their parents. And I'm like, oh, there's a wood, and there's a stone, and there's a railing, and oh, there's a little Ridgell child, and a Cooper, and all of this. And they're just beautiful, and they're singing little songs, and parents are there with tears in their eyes. And I look over, and I see the people who taught my children there, Mrs. Fatke, and I'm so like, all these women, I have such fond memories of them. And Lila says, "Come in my office, talk to me." And
you were all ready.
It was too late.
She had.
She had gotten the right bait, and the hook was there, and so yeah.
And now the irony is she's retired, and you're.
She retired, but she got me in there, and
but you're enjoying it.
I love it every day. I do. I told my kids, I said, I'm doing a podcast today, and there may be some questions about you and the changes in children throughout the years, and I said, I don't know if it's Monday or what. I said, I feel like I'm just in a great big box of people talking. And I said, I will not continue unless there's silence. It took a good minute and a half before they all settled down. Mondays are always lively, but they're wonderful children. And I just feel like every day I'm making a huge difference. I think about those things that I remember from childhood that made a big impression on me, either positive or negative. And then I think about the things throughout my life that have meant the most to me. And one is to realize that the world is an amazing, wonderful, big place, and there's a place for us in it. And we are given talents by God, and those talents need to be used. And you go out there, and they're like, oh, I don't have a talent. And I'm like, oh my goodness, and I could name 7 of them. So we'll get the class together and say, well, if you had to talk about X or Y, what would you say about them? And the kids will go through this long list. She's pretty. She can sing really well. She is kind out at recess. And so they're very affirming to each other. They're also very hard on each other.
Oh, yeah. Kids are kids.
They will. But that's good because I have my mother's Irish ken, is what they call it, understanding of things. It's like you know things. I'll know when somebody is not a good person. I will know when somebody is a truly good person. I'll know when there's problems. I'll know exactly when a kid's trying to get one over on me. Uh-huh. And they always go, stop it. She knows these things. Don't you know? So they think that I have a sixth sense. So they're not going to get anything over on me.
They're lucky to have you.
Oh, no, I am lucky to be there. I am blessed. I truly am. I love it.
It's so nice that you do what you love.
I do what you love.
That's one of the secrets of life.
Yeah, because I was like, oh, Lila's leaving. I'll do one year. And then I said, oh, no, they really need me through this transition. I'll do one more year. And then I was like, this is going to be my last year. And then we have a new principal this year. And I said, oh, Mary, I love Mary. This is her 30th year, Mary Van Riswick. I'm going to stay. I love the staff. And it's a really good year so
far. We'll do another podcast 3 years from now.
Yeah.
I got money that you're still there.
I don't know. I just don't know. I think I have it, but the kids love to point out my mistakes, which I do make many of them. Sometimes I do it on purpose, I tell them, just to make sure they're listening. And we call it quality control.
That's good.
So they're watching to make sure Mrs. P doesn't make any mistakes. And so that keeps them on their toes. But it's funny, today, one of them said, it's noon. How did it get to be noon? Boy, the day seems to be going so fast. And I said, that's because you have Mrs. P. The most interesting teacher in the entire world. And they're like, yeah.
And they agree?
They agree because,
You are doing a good job.
well, no, what they do is they'll say, we'll have like a warm up and I'll have a question about a narwhal or a narwhal, it's what I call them, but a narwhal. And they'll say, tell me again what a narwhal is. They know because they want me to put on a video about narwhals and the studies of them and how rare they are and where they live. They'll go, Columbus Day. Isn't that one of those holidays we're not supposed to like? I said, well, I'm going to tell you about it. And so we learn about Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day. And then we look at simple machines as they were used by the natives here, the Yokomoco Indians, and the colonists, and what a compound machine is. And then we set up a trip to historic St. Mary's City so that we will be studying all of the primitive life ways of the
arrange that.
natives. And Mr. P is my husband, John Padukiewicz, is the STEAM teacher, which is, science, technology, what's the next one? Science, technology, engineering, art, and math. So art's in there. And there's actually one called STREAM where you get religion in there, but we infuse religion and the love of God's creation into everything. So Mr. P comes, he does one trip per month. Field trip. We just did Point Lookout. And one of the things that happened there, I was in one of the rooms, the bedrooms, with some of my Hispanic kids, and they really like scary stuff. If you want horror, they watch horror shows. And we're in the room, and there's, I think it was a Lionel train, no track or anything, just there on like a side table. And there you're going. And the train moved like 3 or 4 inches.
No.
Yes. I saw it.
This is in the lighthouse.
In the lighthouse.
Second room on the left? Upstairs?
It's the room with the windows that look out towards the river, and there's the little black trains, just two of them. And
Did you see it?
oh yes, I was watching it when it happened, and I'm like, there's nothing going on, and a beautiful day and everything, and they go, Mrs. P, the train is moving. We're watching it move, and I said, oh, it's a ghost, and I said I don't believe in ghosts, but I said, who knows? And they're all, whoa, and run out. But we did see the train move. But it was nothing. I mean, nothing spooky happened. The train just went like that.
Just moved.
It just moved. But the kids they had a wonderful program. The children were given butterfly nets because we're just about the beginning of the migration of the monarch butterflies down to Mexico. So they got to catch monarch butterflies, and the rangers were tagging them, so that when they get to the other end, they'll know they came from Point Lookout, Scotland, Maryland, down to Mexico.
Great.
We are so important.
Great.
But next thing we're doing is we're going to historic St. Mary's City, and we have a relationship with the base and the museum. So these kids they just tested their science test. And as a teacher, when you pour so much into children, all of them are really high in science.
Good.
And they're doing very well in everything.
Then that's good for the future.
It is good for the future because it's with AI, et cetera. It's a great unknown, what jobs there will be available. But they do know the world is beautiful. They have potential. They can be something or someone who will make a difference. So
good job.
That's my life.
It's a good life. Thank you, and thank you. See ya.
This is Chief Larry, and if you're enjoying J Scott and the Buzzy's Country Store podcast, please like, subscribe, and share. And as always, you're always welcomed here at Buzzy's.